as governor of New Jersey, and one of the very first things he did was create a new high-profile state agency. Can you guess what it's going to do? It won't be stamping out rampant opioid abuse in New Jersey, unfortunately. It won't be working to boost that state's lagging economy either. It won't fix the budget, which is perpetually in deficit, or even fill some of those ubiquitous potholes that test your shock absorbers when you pull off for coffee on the Garden State Parkway. It certainly won't be fighting crime. In fact, it'll be doing just the opposite. Governor Phil Murphy's new state task force will exist explicitly to subvert and undermine America's existing laws. The office is called the Office of Immigrant Defense Protection. It'll offer legal assistance to illegal immigrants so they can evade deportation or at least delay it long enough to receive the driver's licenses and taxpayer-funded college aid that Governor Murphy also wants to give them. Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. Democrat Phil Murphy replaced Chris Christie today as governor of New Jersey. And one of the very first things he did was create a new high-profile state agency. Can you guess what it's going to do? It won't be stamping out rampant opioid abuse in New Jersey, unfortunately. It won't be working to boost that state's lagging economy either. It won't fix the budget, which is perpetually in deficit, or even fill some of those ubiquitous potholes that test your shock absorbers when you pull off for coffee on the Garden State Parkway. It certainly won't be fighting crime. In fact, it'll be doing just the opposite. Governor Phil Murphy's new state task force will exist explicitly to subvert and undermine America's existing laws. The office is called the Office of Immigrant Defense Protection. It'll offer legal assistance to illegal immigrants so they can evade deportation or at least delay it long enough to receive the driver's licenses and taxpayer-funded college aid that Governor Murphy also wants to give them. So the message of all of this could not be clearer. Governor Murphy's top priority is not the citizens of New Jersey, but instead people who shouldn't be there in the first place. If you don't believe that, take a look at New Jersey's cities, nearly all of which are hurting badly and have been for generations. Camden, right across the river from Philadelphia, is one of the toughest places on this continent. Its unemployment rate is more than double the national average. 30% of its residents live below the poverty line. Parts of it are so dangerous you wouldn't walk down the street. Newark and Paterson are not much better than that. But Governor Murphy has not announced a new state agency to fix those places. No other liberal governor in America is doing that either, because, let's be honest, Democrats have given up on blighted American neighborhoods. The schools are terrible. They're not getting better. The people there shoot each other. Who knows why? Unemployment, broken families, drug addiction. It is a tragedy in slow motion, and everybody knows it. But where's the energy to make any of it better, to help our fellow Americans? Well, it's been siphoned off to serve a new and more fashionable cause, one not incidentally with greater long-term electoral prospects. Illegal immigrants, that's the new cause. As for the American poor, people whose families have been here for 300 years and are still suffering, and illegal immigrants, that's the new cause. As for the American poor, people whose families have been here for 300 years and are still suffering and dying young, as long as Democrats take their votes for granted, they'll continue to get lip service, and that's it. John McKeon is a member of the New Jersey Assembly, and he joins us tonight. Mr. McKeon, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So I just checked the numbers, and in Newark, New Jersey, I think the state's still the biggest city, about 12% of high schoolers are adequate in math. In Camden, among kids in grades 3 through 8, it's 7% have reached the math standard. Why wouldn't the incoming governor make that his priority and not legal aid to illegal aliens?
Well, I think you're unfair in the premise of what you said. And first and foremost, as it relates to New Jersey, there's 500,000 undocumented in our state. That's 6% of our population. So they're not the criminals that you purport them to be. They're our neighbors and our friends.
I'm not calling them criminals.
Well,
I'm not calling what I'm calling them is non-Americans, which they are. And I'm not against them, actually. I think they're probably mostly nice people. But I think the government has a duty first and foremost to protect its own people. And in New Jersey, as you know, I used to live in the state, so I know too, has cities that are crumbling and pathetic and dangerous, and the schools are terrible. So where's the emphasis on that?
Well, I don't know where you're saying the schools are terrible. And first off, Governor Murphy is going to make schools and fully funding a priority. We have some of the best public schools in the nation. So you can, pick and choose different scores from cities that have their own issues and try again to make an inappropriate premise.
Is Newark the biggest city in New Jersey? I think it was when I lived
Jersey City
there.
and Newark, give or take, about the same
Okay,
size.
so if you've got 12% of high schoolers adequate in math, do you think that's a success?
Of course it isn't, and we can always do better, and that's one of the governor's priorities. But I thought we came to talk about the department that is going to look after those who are refugees,
because
those who are dreamers,
it's a state in
those who are
deficit,
green card holders. We have to make sure they have access to adequate information, no different than adequate legal services.
So I think we'll both agree that a government's first job is to take care of its own citizens, the ones who put it in power in the first place, whose votes give it legitimacy. So how does giving financial aid for college tuition to illegals help American citizens in New Jersey?
See, you're skipping ahead to all of that. When it comes to it, what we need to do, when you look at what's happened now within the last year and a half or year of President Trump, we've seen statistics go down from a crime reporting perspective among the Latino population as it relates to domestic violence, as it relates to sexual assault, down by as much as 20%. Why is that? It's because they're afraid to report it. Is that in our best interest to keep us safe? Do you think that criminals are discriminating and just going after undocumented?
I think we may be having parallel conversations. We may be having parallel conversations. I just asked you, the governor, I think today said our plan is to use taxpayer money to help the children of people here illegally go to college. And I know why it's great for them. I can see why they're happy about it. Why should a New Jersey resident who's an American citizen think this helps him?
Well, overall, you're taking a piece of the component of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about driver's licenses. Now, guess what? Undocumenteds drive anyway. Isn't it better to make sure that they take a safety test, are better prepared to do so, can get drivers to get insurance? Isn't that in all of our best interest to make us all safer?
Well, I don't know. It would probably be best if they left, but since they're here, look, I get it, but what I find confusing is, since you're not going to answer my question about college tuition, how about this? Democrats tell us that there are millions of African Americans, citizens, who don't have driver's licenses. Why isn't New Jersey starting a program to get them driver's licenses and instead giving them to illegal aliens with a new program? I'm missing it.
Well, I didn't know that the show or your bent was to force people to do things that they can otherwise do. You wouldn't suggest that we should force licenses on people, right? That's not, I don't think, your philosophy.
But I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying Democrats are always saying we can't have voter ID laws because a lot of African Americans don't have IDs. Here, your state is saying we're going to help people here illegally get IDs. Why not help your own people first? That's the theme I'm asking you about, and I'm not getting a real answer. Yeah,
and don't even get into the voter ID piece, because, as you know, that's only about voter suppression, and you're picking on groups of people that happen to vote Democratic that you're trying to keep from suppressing voting.
I'm not picking on anybody. I'm asking why you're not helping them and instead helping illegal aliens. But let's get to my question about college aid. Every parent in America worries about the cost. Now taxpayers in New Jersey will be subsidizing the cost for illegal aliens. Why does that help them? Why does that help citizens of New Jersey?
Didn't you say, as you said, you should throw them all out? I mean, could you really be suggesting that we're going to take 500,000 people in our state and deport them? Could you be suggesting that we take 11 million
because you don't have an
nationwide and send them out of this country?
Well, how about this? Let's start with,
that's a different thing.
Maybe you should start with explaining to our viewers why it's in their interest as American citizens to see their tax dollars go to educate people here illegally. How does it help them? That's a fair question. We both agree.
It's a fair question, and eventually, when there's sanity in Washington, when there's a path to citizenship for the 11 million people that are here and undocumented, because they'll never be all removed, you know that, then those allowing individuals to become educated will make them more productive citizens and an important part of our fiber in this country.
You're
and that's
suggesting
why it's to our advantage. Why is it ever anybody's advantage to provide aid to people? It's to make them more productive and better citizens in our country.
But there are lots of Americans, a lot of Americans, most Americans, who worry about the cost of tuition for their kids. It's their country. Why not take that money and give it to them to help their kids? I don't understand.
A whole different topic. As you know, Governor Murphy, in one of his priorities, is relating to having junior colleges and tuition-free for New Jersey citizens that are good students. So there is much by way of programs that you're just focusing on, the one having to do with supporting those who are undocumented, and particularly the dreamers, the refugees, as well as green card holders, to have a clearinghouse, legal aid, so they can understand what their options are and not be afraid. That's a fair thing to do.
And fight federal law. Yeah, I get it. Okay, thanks a lot, Assemblyman. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Lawrence Jones is a reporter as well as a radio and television host over at The Blaze, and he joins us tonight. Lawrence, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So I don't think I'm being unfair, when I ask why, in a state that has a limited pot of money, the priority seems to be people who are here illegally over people who are born here and are hurting.
Tucker, I've been trying to sit quietly as this debate continued between you and your last guest. I sat through 8 years of the Obama administration that put other citizens, other country citizens before its own. And quite frankly, I think the American people sent a message and said that was over. Now we have another Democrat that has taken office and essentially said, look, you don't matter. Other citizens of other countries matter more than you. Look, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of young black men and women that have dreams as well. Their education is failing in New Jersey. The unemployment is terrible. You got poverty. That a lot of that money could be going to benefit them. Democrats would rather, despite black folks giving them 90+% of their vote, put other people first before them.
Do you think it's despite giving 96% of the vote, or perhaps because of it? If you think a vote is guaranteed, then why would you be concerned about the worries of those voters? You've already won them over. You don't need to tend to that garden.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's why I'm talking to the young people, the people that are in my community. Enough is enough. You have seen the benefits of the Trump administration. Black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. You have to make a choice if you're going to continue to vote for policies that only produce poverty and not wealth. You know, Tucker, the Democrats want to talk about emotions. I got an emotional argument for them that's also logical. When black people came here on slave ships unwillingly, they still had to have a constitutional amendment to get citizenship and get the rights of all other Americans. So why would we just allow people here, give them government funding, give them free education, a social program to benefit them when we had people that came here unwillingly and they still had to go through a legal process?
Well, I agree with that. You ought to side with your fellow countrymen first, always. Lawrence, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tucker.
I appreciate that. Well, the Department of Justice just announced plans to appeal a San Francisco judge's decision ordering the continuation of the DACA program. A single unelected federal judge suddenly in charge of the entire country's immigration policy somehow. DOJ is fighting that. Meanwhile, though, we have new and fascinating stats tonight on immigration, both legal and illegal, and how it intersects with crime in America, as it often does. According to federal numbers released today, America's terror threat is clearly, among other things, an immigration issue. Of the 549 people convicted of terror offenses between 9/11 and the end of 2016, fully 73% were immigrants. Many of them entered this country through chain migration and the diversity lottery, both of which allow immigrants here without regard for their skills or how well they would integrate into American society. And clearly, many are not integrating. The DOJ estimates that more than 20 people in this country are murdered every year in honor killings, almost always by family members who see them as, quote, too westernized. About 1,500 are put into forced marriages in this country annually. Between 2003 and 2009, immigrants to the United States committed about 70,000 sex crimes. None of these facts require we shut down immigration. No one's arguing that. But they do demand an honest discussion, not dismissive accusations of bigotry every time somebody raises the subject. You've heard the response 1,000 times. Shut up, dumb American. Illegal aliens are more law-abiding than you are and way more impressive, and some fake study proves that. Well, not so fast. A new report released by John Lott of the Crime Prevention Research Center takes a close look at how illegal immigration affected crime in one state, Arizona. And the numbers are stark. In the state of Arizona, illegal immigrants are more than 2.5 times more likely to commit murder as U.S. citizens are. They're almost 3 times as likely to commit manslaughter, far more likely to be convicted of a sex crime against children, as well as armed robbery. Convicted illegal immigrants, 45% more likely to be gang members. Overall, young illegal immigrants break the law, and not just immigration law, the rest of the laws, at twice the rate of American citizens. So for at least one state, we know that illegal immigration is directly linked to higher crime rates. These numbers deserve honest discussion in the halls of power, not shrieks of bigotry and angry declarations that all immigrants are future Medal of Honor recipients. The fact that elites don't want to have that conversation says everything about what their real priorities are, and you're not on the list of priorities, trust me. Attorney General Jeff Sessions oversaw the release of the DOJ terrorism report, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Attorney General, thanks for coming on.
Good to be with you.
So given these numbers, it does give new urgency, I think, to the immigration negotiations going on right now in Washington. You were involved in a number of efforts, I think in 06, 07, 13, to scuttle attempts at amnesty. And during that time, I remember you saying the Washington establishment supports any kind of border enforcement as long as it doesn't work. What did you mean by that?
That's exactly correct. Anytime a proposal like a wall or to fix this idea that you can claim you're afraid to go home and you get to stay in the United States, or you have problems where we provide subsidies to people who come illegally, the more you subsidize it, the more you get of something. These kind of failed policies are just never going to work, and the American people don't believe in it, and we've been trying to reform it, and every time you come up with a reform that works, gets blocked. And so President Trump has said, we have immigration, we want immigration, but we want to vet these people. We want to know who they are and make sure they're going to be productive people, people who will flourish in America, who are going to not be terrorists, not be criminals, and that's exactly correct for America. It's just unbelievable to me that we have the resistance we're having today to the reforms that are on the verge. We are close to having reforms that will actually work today.
And that voters voted for, by the way, in 2016.
The big issue in this election, Trump took it directly to the American people. It was a huge factor in his victory, yet the same crowd that fought for the amnesty before is still trying to scuttle good reforms today.
So apparently, here are features of the proposal we're now looking at. It would fund just about 10% of the proposed border wall, about 70 miles out of 2,000. No enforcement, basically. You can't deport anybody. It would expand chain migration. Dreamers could bring their relatives. It makes a diversity lottery more low-skilled. It doesn't seem like it's moving in the right direction.
Totally unjustifiable. That cannot be. That is not a proposal that has any prospect of success. They need to look at the proposal that House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Goodlatte has proposed. That will work. It will end the illegality, make a tremendous progress toward ending illegality, and make the system work better. That's what the American people want. And the objectors, the sanctuary cities, the New Jersey policy you just talked about, those are policies that favor illegality. They subsidize illegality. They encourage illegality. American people are sick of that. It's time to end it. The choice is clear, and it's going to be even clearer this year. We're going to have some votes in Congress. People need to be held to account. Are you going to fix this system, create a system that protects America? We know that, as you said, 73% of the people who've been arrested for terrorism came here, were born abroad. So if they had been properly screened and rejected, we wouldn't have had these attacks in our country.
So someone I spoke to with direct knowledge said that in his meeting with the president on immigration, Lindsey Graham summed up his closing argument by reciting Emma Lazarus's poem from the Statue of Liberty. Not really a case that you'd expect Republicans to be making. Why aren't there more articulate Republican members of the Congress making the case that you just made?
Well, I wish there were. Actually, I think people need to get focused on this. We are not against immigration. The president is not against immigration. What the American people want, have a right to, and what's good for America is a lawful system of immigration. And when we admit people to our country, we should be like Canada. We should evaluate them and make sure they're going to be lawful, they're not threats to us, they have the education and skills level to prosper in America. That's good for them and good for America. What good does it do to bring in somebody who's illiterate in their own country, has no skills, and is going to struggle in our country and not be successful? That is not what a good nation should do, and we need to get away from it. A good debate needs to be happening this year. The president is right on the lottery. That's ridiculous. How absurd is that for a policy for a great nation? We need to tighten up on our admission of people from dangerous areas of the globe where we can't vet, where we have high numbers of terrorists that live in those areas. We should certainly be more careful and limit that kind of immigration.
Mr. Attorney General, when you left the Senate, it lost maybe its best voice on this. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. The Me Too movement finally meeting some actual backlash. Aziz Ansari facing sexual misconduct allegations over what seems to be a bad date. That story next. Well, the Me Too movement could finally have gone too far, even for many of its supporters. The site Babe.com, which, by the way, no one had ever heard of until last week, published sexual misconduct allegations against a comedian called Aziz Ansari. The piece sought to ride the wave of post-Harvey Weinstein outrage. Instead, most people believe Ansari did nothing wrong, or seem to. HLN anchor Ashley Banfield denounced the accuser, the anonymous one who attacked Ansari, saying that she was trying to ruin a man's career over a bad date. Here's part of it.
You had a bad date. Your date got overly amorous. After protesting his moves, you did not get up and leave right away. You continued to engage in the sexual encounter. What you have done, in my opinion, is appalling. You went to the press with the story of a bad date, and you have potentially destroyed this man's career over it.
Now, Ansari's a big liberal, which may account for some of the defense you're hearing, but still, the ladies at The View even were mad. They worried the story could cripple the Me Too movement long term. Here it is.
So if you're on a date and he's not as good as you thought, you know, and you're uncomfortable, and you go, does that mean stop, get out, go away? Whatever happened to stop, or I'm going to knock you in your nuts? Or
nonverbal, it's very tricky.
Yeah.
You're asking a lot. Nonverbal is just too vague. I think you have to be verbal. And once no is established, then it's established.
I'm concerned about what this does to the Me Too movement, and I'm also freaked out about talking about this on television because I think there's going to be a huge backlash.
Again, Aziz Ansari is a liberal. It may account for a lot of this, of course it does, but it still raises interesting points. Kathy Aru is joining us to talk about them. She's the founding publisher of Catalina Magazine. She likes the Babe piece. She joins us tonight. Kathy, thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I guess what struck me about this is that the woman making these accusations against this man concedes in the body of the piece that she both had sexual contact with him, pretty extensive sexual contact, and never expressed discomfort, displeasure, asked him to stop, never said anything about it. So it's hard to see how that would be assault or anything even in the neighborhood of assault. How is it?
Well, she was trying to let him know, I guess, non-verbally that she wasn't into the moment, and she didn't realize, like in the 70s, women would slap a guy in the face and get up and leave, and perhaps a new sexual revolution is needed in our country or in the world, and she didn't know that she could actually do that. So women need to be educated, and the Me Too movement is great because we're letting women know you can get up and leave.
Okay,
yeah?
So let me just say, I thought that Ansari came off as creepy in the piece and self-centered and boorish or whatever, but those aren't crimes. They're common, actually.
Right.
But so you're saying that in the 70s, women would have slapped men, but now they won't. So you're saying that despite almost 50 years of nonstop feminist indoctrination of every living American, women have become more passive and less willing to speak up for themselves? How is that? How does that work?
Well, we haven't had sexual revolutions happening every 10 years or every few years. We had the sexual revolution happen in the 70s, and then it kind of was assumed that women knew that they had strength and power. And until the Me Too movement, that hasn't been the case.
So who are these women? I mean, I know a lot of women, live with a lot of women. I don't know any women who would feel uncomfortable saying knock it off if something was going on that they really didn't like. Who are these sort of passive, meek women who you spend time? Well, okay, but is that? But whose fault is that? I mean, I don't want to attack anyone.
The women who published the piece at the Babe magazine. That's why it's getting so much recognition.
So what's your point? That if you don't read my mind, you're a criminal, and I get to destroy your reputation? Is that a good standard?
If you're a guy who's acting a little creepy and the woman's uncomfortable, but you keep going and you're having a great time while the person you're with is obviously miserable, but you're not picking up on it, it's A-okay. And the Me Too movement is letting women know.
Why doesn't the woman just say I'm? Well, but hold on. Why does the woman just say I'm miserable? I don't understand. Is that too much to ask of another human being?
She finally said it. She said it too late, and she said it at Babe.
She wrote this piece. Hold on. She wrote this piece anonymously, and Babe.com was too cowardly to identify her, so he gets smeared, but she hides behind the veil of anonymity. So she's a coward too.
He didn't say it was a lie. He did what he did. So why is that smearing?
Well, she's writing about their sex. I mean, hold on. She's attacking him anonymously in a piece about his sex
She's
life.
giving the facts. It wasn't an attack. She gave the facts on what happened that night. And it's up to the reader, the person, to say, was he right? Was she right? Was that awkward? So I don't think it was an attack. I think it was simply saying this is what the guy did. What do you think?
It was an attack. But I guess what I'm struck by is you're obviously a professional feminist. I'm definitely not. But I seem to have a higher opinion of women than you do. You seem to think that they're so weak and helpless that it's understandable that they're afraid to say something as simple as, I don't like that.
No, I think they're trying to say it. They're just not saying it in the right way.
How about saying it at all? She didn't say it at all. She didn't say one word. Because I actually think women are adults. You don't, apparently, but I do.
I do
and
believe
so they're
women are
capable
adults.
of saying
I
what they think.
women need to feel more empowered because women are powerful and they need to feel more empowered. And I think thanks to Me Too and for these type of stories, women will know, you know what, I'm not going to let that happen to me. I'm going to speak up. So thank goodness this story was written.
This is also insane. I'm not sure what to say. I should probably stop talking. Kathy, thank you. As always, you are our Sherpa into the weirder regions of the American left, and we're grateful that you are. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, a college advisor has resigned after publicly hoping that a conservative commentator would suffer sexual harassment or assault. Ali Stuckey is a CRTV host and blogs as the Conservative Millennial. Recently, Jeff Bernstein, he's an advisor or was for Georgetown Foreign Service Master's Program, tweeted this at Stuckey, quote, wishing you a Me Too moment, maybe then you won't be so insensitive. Bernstein, who sounds horrible, resigned from the advisory board yesterday after threatening Ali Stuckey, who, by the way, joins us right now. Ali, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, people have suspected for a couple months now that the left is using the Me Too hashtag and the movement as a weapon against its political opponents, but this guy didn't even try and hide it. He just said it.
Exactly, and I think that's one of the many problems with the Me Too moment or the Me Too movement. I take sexual harassment and sexual assault very seriously and its victims very seriously, as everyone does. However, I think one of the fatal flaws of this movement is the weaponization of Me Too, not just against almost all men, but also against conservatives to shame us for our political views. And unfortunately, when I dug a little deeper on Mr. Bernstein, I saw that this was actually a pattern that he had of targeting not just young women, but young conservative women online, making very suggestive and inappropriate and harassing remarks like he made to me. And unfortunately, he is now reaping the repercussions of that kind of tribalism.
Well, he sounds like a total creep. Wishing sexual harassment or assault on you? Is that how you took it? I mean, is that, I'm not misinterpreting his sentiment, am I?
No, that's exactly how I took it. And quite honestly, I was a little bit surprised and confused when I first read it, simply because the tweet that he was replying to that I said was very non-controversial. I simply made the comment that I think that Me Too is a symptom of a broken world and that our world is in need of redemption, far more serious than any fix of taking down the so-called patriarchy or any kind of legal reform that we can possibly do. I actually thought that my tweet meant that I take Me Too very seriously, but he took it upon himself to then wish, I guess, that I was sexually harassed or assaulted, so I would then believe the things that he believes. And it's sad to me that that's where we are in society, that we think that wishing someone harm is an acceptable form of communication and dissent. It's not. Yeah,
so he loves women so much that he's wishing physical harm on an actual woman. It sounds really there are a lot of problems with the American right and with conservatives, but they're not like that. To be that perverse, you really have to be on the left. I mean that, too. I've watched it a long time. Hallie, thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Well, Steve Bannon testified before Congress today about Russia. He didn't have a lot to say. Congressman Trey Gowdy is there still. He'll join us in just a minute to tell us what he has seen today. Stay tuned. This week will mark the one-year anniversary of the beginning of the Trump administration, yet still the never-ending Russia investigation grinds on. Steve Bannon was just subpoenaed to appear before Special Counsel Robert Mueller's grand jury. He also testified today before the House Intelligence Committee. Bannon refused to answer the committee's questions about his time at the White House. That prompted committee members to subpoena him on the spot. Congressman Trey Gowdy of South Carolina was there, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks for coming up.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So did Bannon admit being a Russian agent? What did we learn?
We learned about a new privilege that before today did not exist. It's an executive privilege that covers transition communications, communications while you're working at the White House, and then communications after you separate from service at the White House. So that's why the subpoena was issued, is because it is the most tortured analysis of executive privilege I have ever heard of. So when you make very provocative claims like treason and unpatriotic, and there's a 0% chance that these Russian lawyers weren't walked up to then see candidate Trump, then you're going to be asked about it, and you're going to be asked a lot about it, and that's what we tried to do today.
But does anyone believe those claims are true? I mean, I'm sort of losing track of the point of this whole exercise. Does anybody on Capitol Hill think the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government in order to subvert our democracy?
Well, I can't speak for my friends on the other side of the aisle. Adam Schiff said he had evidence of collusion before we even started. I have seen no evidence of collusion between the Russians and President Trump, between the Russians and the Trump campaign. But it was Steve Bannon who used the word treasonous, and it was Steve Bannon who used the word unpatriotic. Those are two pretty serious accusations to level, particularly at the president's son. So you're going to be asked about it, and he also needed to be asked about things that happened with respect to Comey. The reason we had a little hiccup this morning was because executive privilege now covers things before you become the chief executive, which is just mind-numbing, and there's no legal support for it. But we can't make a witness answer a question.
So you've been in the middle of this investigation for a long time. What's your conclusion? Do you think your Democratic colleagues are acting in good faith?
I'm not good at judging people's motives. I can tell you, having been around Congress for 7 years, there's a built-in advantage for the Democrats in dragging this out as long as they possibly can. And they were really, really reticent to start. So once you are reticent to start, that tells me that you don't have an end date. They want this to drag through the 2018 elections. They want to retake the House. It is our responsibility to conduct as thorough an investigation as we can, but also do it in the most expedited way that we can. It'd be really helpful if the Democrats wanted to get started a little sooner, like in March or April of this year, but they didn't. So that's the politics. But quite frankly, Tucker, I don't think any of your viewers are holding their breath waiting on what a congressional investigation uncovers. I think they're waiting on Bob Mueller because his investigation carries more credence with them than ours does.
Well, the whole thing just seems so stupid to me. I mean, I'm willing to believe wrongdoing, on a lot of levels by a lot of people, but Russian collusion seems unproven. I wonder, just hypothetically, if this roles were reversed and Democrats held all the levers of power, do you think Republicans would be able to do what Democrats have done, which is drive this investigation from the beginning?
No, I can tell you firsthand we will not be able to do that because when President Obama was in office, we had an impossible time getting access to documents and witnesses when I was leading another investigation. But the biggest headwind of all wasn't President Obama. It was the media. The mainstream media could give a damn less about what happened in Benghazi. They're really, really interested in what happened in Russia, in part because they don't know anybody that voted for Donald Trump. So they're still trying to figure out how this election occurred and how his election occurred. So the mainstream media is the biggest difference to me between the investigation I did a couple years ago and the one we're doing now.
Yeah, it sure seems that way. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on for that update.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Events. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yet another hate crime allegation goes down in flames, this time in Canada. Everyone's acting surprised. You can't believe it. Should they be surprised? That story next.
Stands with you. Liberty stands with you. Liberty Mutual Insurance.
The West isn't the industrial power it used to be. We still lead the category in at least one export, bogus hate crimes. Last week, an 11-year-old girl in Toronto, Canada, drew attention worldwide when she said a man attacked her and tried to cut off her hijab for no reason except that apparently he hated Islam. Well, former drama teacher and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau immediately got involved, needless to say. He tweeted his condolences and said that anti-hijab violence, quote, is not what Canada is. Well, turns out he was right. A police investigation determined that the attack never happened in the first place. It was fake, a pure fabrication. If you seem surprised, you shouldn't be, because most high-profile hate crimes are indeed fake, at least in this country and in Canada, filled with really nice people who don't do that kind of stuff very much. Remember the incident at the Air Force Academy where bigoted slurs were written outside the dorms of 5 African-American cadets? Well, the general's denunciation of that attack went viral. Less viral was the later revelation that the attack was fake, made up by one of the victims, a total lie. There are dozens of examples like this, unfortunately, and you can see some of them on our Twitter page. But these fake attacks won't be the last ones. They may fuel hate and divide the country, and they do, but they also serve the left's short-term political interests, so people will continue to invent them. Unfortunately, the scars are lasting. I want to bring an update to our series, Drugged. Our own government appears to be playing a large and shocking role in the opioid epidemic, the one that has killed more than 60,000 Americans in just the last year. It turns out the disaster has been fueled in part by Medicaid. That's the federal program that provides medical care for poor and disabled Americans. Medicaid recipients typically pay just a small copayment for medical expenses and medicines, and that includes opioid painkillers. Now, according to a new report released exclusively to this show by the Senate Homeland Security Committee, a Medicaid recipient can pay as little as $1 to receive 240 opioid painkillers. Those pills can be resold on the street for $4,000, and of course that creates a huge incentive for black market sales, which unfortunately are common. Already more than 1,000 people have been charged or convicted of Medicaid fraud specifically related to opioids. And it's not just Medicaid either. Medicare and the VA have seen extensive opioid fraud as well, and people have died as a result. So it turns out the federal government is literally paying to flood American communities with addictive pills. Senator Ron Johnson is holding a hearing on this part of the crisis tomorrow before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Hopefully the rest of the Congress will take notice of it. Well, opioids and immigrant crime are not huge issues to the media. Instead, they spent today obsessed with the president's routine physical condition. They're obsessed, as all fashionable rich people are, with what he eats. Of course they are. Britt Hume breaks it down next. It's probably the most high-profile routine physical in political history. The White House physician, Ronnie Jackson, spent a full hour, a little over it, I think, in the White House briefing room today, taking questions about President Trump's physical and mental state. It was a pretty remarkable series of exchanges. Here's part of it.
Do you believe he is fit for duty?
Absolutely, he's fit for duty.
What exactly does the exercise and eating plan look like? Is it you're going to put an elliptical machine next to the bedroom and he's going to use it? What does that look like? Is he limited to 1 scoop of ice cream now?
I don't limit his diet at all.
Some people have suggested that could be related to dentures. Does the president wear dentures?
He does not.
Did you address drug addiction?
Drug addiction?
I mean, any other drugs?
Yeah, no, he has no drug addiction. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
How about sexual?
Can you explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicks and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in?
It's called genetics.
Well, does the elaborate theater over the president's health say much about the president or about the press? Fox senior political analyst Britt Hume joins us tonight. Britt, thanks for coming on. So if Trump runs again and I were in charge of his ads, which of course I won't be, but if I were, I wouldn't brag about the achievements or defend myself against the attacks. I would just run a tape of reporters asking, does he wear dentures? What's his life expectancy? What's his waist circumference? I think that would get him reelected.
Well, no, I don't know about that, Tucker, but he got a pretty clean bill of health, that's for sure. And remember, part of this is a function of the fact that he told Admiral Jackson, his doctor, who, by the way, was previously the doctor to President Obama and President George W. Bush, and enjoys a very, very high reputation. He told him to go out and not refuse any questions, to answer all questions. So, you know, the press saying this is open season is pretty soon into dentures and eating habits. And there was one exchange of questions about his waistline and all that. They apparently didn't measure his waistline because there was no reason to do it.
Well, he's not a tailor.
But it went to everything. And then, of course, probably most importantly, consider the current furor over his mental condition. The president had asked, although it wasn't clinically indicated, that this doctor give him a cognitive exam, and he gave him one, which concluded, because he got 30 questions out of 30 correct, that his cognitive faculties are very much in order and that he's sharp and on it and coherent. Now, that's not a psychiatric exam, it should be noted, but it's a pretty good test of whether somebody's sort of mentally fit. And he passed that with flying colors, and there was you could detect a certain skepticism and disappointment in the room about it. But the doctor was pretty emphatic, and I think, to any fair-minded viewer, pretty convincing.
So I remember during the last presidential campaign when Hillary Clinton had some kind of collapse in New York, I think it was on the anniversary of 9/11, we were explicitly instructed by the Washington Post not to ask about her health. When did the rules change?
Well, I think we did. I think we did end up asking about her health, but
there was
not a lot of information. I did, and there were not a lot of answers forthcoming. And, to be perfectly fair about it, Tucker, I mean, one is entitled to have a confidential relationship with one's doctors about your mental condition. And the president just waived all that. No president that I've ever heard of has ever done anything like that. And, of course, we know if we go back far enough, you come across presidents like President Roosevelt, who concealed his paralysis to the greatest extent possible so that, most Americans didn't even know about it until after he was dead. And the press was complicit in that all the way through because reporters who covered him and saw him every day knew it but never reported it. So that's how much the atmosphere has changed. And, of course, at this stage, it's open season. And I think the president obviously felt that if these questions were going to be raised, and he is in remarkably good health, owing apparently, as you heard, to good genes for a man of 71 who's 6'3" and 239 pounds, he wanted all of that out there. So he was partly responsible for this. But the thing went on for 56 minutes, which really is unprecedented.
It really was. I mean, it really was forensic. Unbelievable. Britt Hume, thank you. It was great to see you tonight.
You bet, Tucker. Thank you.
More on the show to come, plus Sean Hannity following the show. We'll be right back.